The Council fleet emerged from the portal like a swarm of locusts. 10,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, arranged in perfect formations that spoke of absolute confidence. They had done this before hundreds of times to hundreds of species. Occupation was routine. Resistance was expected and easily crushed. Admiral Vorak, commanding from the flagship Eternal Judgment, studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The human homeworld sat before him, blue and green and utterly defenseless. Long-range scans showed primitive orbital platforms, a few satellites, some small craft moving between Earth and its moon. Nothing that could threaten a Council warship, let alone 10,000 of them. Send the surrender demand, Vorak ordered. Standard procedure. Give them one last chance to submit peacefully. It would be ignored. There would be a token resistance, and then the occupation would begin. 3 days, maybe 4, and humanity would be under Council control. The message went out. Vorak waited for the response. What came back was not what he expected. This is Admiral Soman of the Earth Defense Force. You came here to enslave us. We decline. You should leave now. Vorak's translator struggled with the tone. Was it sarcasm? Bravado? Delusion? He checked the scans again. No hidden fleet. No superweapons. Just one planet and its terrified population waiting for the inevitable. Curious, his tactical officer observed. They're not even trying to evacuate. Stubbornness, Vorak decided. Break orbit around their moon. Show them what they're facing. Once they see our full strength, they'll reconsider. The fleet began moving forward in perfect coordination. 10,000 ships, engines burning bright enough to be seen from Earth's surface, a show of force designed to break morale. It had worked on every other species the Council had faced. Junho watched from his cockpit as the alien fleet advanced. Around him, invisible in the asteroid belt, 3,000 ghost fighters waited in perfect silence. No engines, no emissions, nothing that could be detected. They'd been here for 3 days, drifting like rocks, waiting for this moment. His targeting computer came alive as the enemy fleet entered range. Command ships first. That was the order. Cut off the head and the body would panic. Junho selected his targets, the 3 largest vessels in the formation, including Vorak's flagship. All units, Yunji's voice came through his helmet. Execute Operation Hammerfall. Make every shot count. For Earth. For Earth, Junho whispered, and pressed the firing stud. 3,000 ghost fighters appeared simultaneously, their weapons already firing. Not energy weapons that the aliens could detect and defend against. Missiles. Hundreds of thousands of missiles, accelerating to incredible speeds in seconds, carrying warheads designed to exploit every weakness Minho's team had discovered in Council shields. Vorak's first warning was when alarms started screaming. His second warning was when 3 missiles punched through the Eternal Judgment's shields and detonated inside the hangar bay. The flagship shuddered. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. And suddenly the tactical display was showing 3,000 unknown contacts appearing from nowhere, inside the Council formation. How? Vorak demanded. Where did they come from? His tactical officer was frantically trying to get readings. Unknown. Sensors didn't detect them. They're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. Another explosion rocked the ship. Then another. The Eternal Judgment was dying, and Vorak didn't even understand how the attack had started. Around him, other command ships were reporting the same thing. Surprise attacks from invisible enemies. Systems failing. Shields collapsing. All ships return fire. Vorak ordered. Target those fighters. But the ghost fighters were already gone, disappearing back into the asteroid field, their missiles doing the work for them. In the space of 6 minutes, the Council lost its command structure. 15 command ships destroyed or crippled. Communications disrupted. The neat formation dissolving into chaos. That was when the second attack began. Soman watched from the bridge of humanity's flagship, hidden behind the moon. The ghost fighters had done their job perfectly. The alien fleet was confused, disorganized, trying to figure out what had hit them. They were looking the wrong direction. All ships, Soman ordered, execute firing sequence Alpha. Let's show them what we learned from physics class. The kinetic platforms activated, scattered across the solar system on asteroids and moons and hidden satellites. Magnetic accelerators began firing, not explosive rounds, just metal. Tungsten rods, iron spheres, even chunks of processed asteroid. Simple mass accelerated to 80% of light speed. At those velocities, mass became unstoppable. Einstein's equations didn't lie. The kinetic energy was immense, and the aliens' shields designed to stop energy weapons might as well have been tissue paper. The first impactor hit a carrier. The tungsten rod, no larger than a telephone pole, punched through the shields without slowing. It entered the front of the ship and exited the rear, the kinetic transfer turning everything in between into superheated plasma. The carrier didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the molecular level by the impact. More impactors followed. Hundreds of them, fired from dozens of platforms, each one traveling too fast for the aliens to track or evade. The Council ships started dying in groups. A battleship broke in half. A destroyer simply vanished in a cloud of debris. A support vessel was hit so hard it was thrown into another ship, and both vessels were destroyed in the collision. Vorak stared at the tactical display in horror. In 15 minutes, the Council had lost over 1,000 ships. 15 minutes. The humans hadn't even sent their main fleet yet, and a tenth of his armada was gone. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships emergency jump to Rally Point Beta." But jumping required time to charge drives, time to coordinate, time the humans weren't giving them. More kinetic rounds hammered into the fleet. More ships died. The perfect formation had become a disaster. Ships colliding with each other in their panic to escape, blocking each other's retreat vectors. Hana coordinated the attack from Earth's command center, her displays showing real-time data from every human asset in the solar system. The ghost fighters were repositioning for another strike. The kinetic platforms were reloading, and now finally it was time for the main event. "Tell Admiral Salman she's cleared to engage," Hana ordered. Salman's fleet emerged from behind the moon. 20 capital ships, 200 escorts, and 500 fighters. Not nearly as many ships as the Council had, but the aliens were already broken. What humanity lacked in numbers, it made up for in pure aggression. Human ships didn't fight like the aliens expected. There were no formation battles, no polite exchanges of fire at long range, no honor. The human doctrine was simple: get close, hit hard, don't stop until the enemy is dead. Salman's flagship drove straight into the alien formation like a spear. Point defense systems shredded anything that got close. Missile batteries fired in full salvos, overwhelming shields through sheer volume of fire. And when they got close enough, the humans used weapons the Council had never seen before. Railguns, mass drivers, weapons that threw solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The aliens had shields for energy weapons. They had armor for explosives. But they had nothing for a 100-kilogram tungsten slug, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Human ships closed to ranges that seemed suicidal, taking damage but dealing far more, turning the space battle into something like a knife fight in a dark alley. Junho and the Ghost Fighters came back for their second pass. This time they didn't bother hiding. They dove into the chaos, targeting engines and weapons systems, crippling ships that were already damaged, finishing off the wounded. No mercy, no prisoners, just pure destruction. Vorak's flagship was dying. Half the crew was dead. Life support was failing. The Eternal Judgment, pride of the Council fleet, was now a floating wreck. Around him, the battle continued. His ships were fighting desperately, but they were losing badly. How? Vorak asked the empty air. How is this possible? His dying tactical officer managed one last sentence. They weren't defending. They were hunting. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 3,000 Council ships were destroyed. Another 1,000 were too damaged to fight. The survivors retreated through emergency portals, jumping to distant rally points, carrying with them the story of what had happened. The Council had sent 10,000 ships to enslave humanity. Humanity had destroyed or crippled 40% of that fleet in 6 hours, and Earth had lost exactly 73 ships. Salman stood on her bridge looking at the debris field that stretched across space. Millions of tons of wrecked alien vessels, the largest graveyard the solar system had ever seen. She felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a grim determination. Send a message to the Council, she ordered. Tell them this was their first mistake. Tell them every time they come back we'll kill more of them. Tell them they should have left us alone. The message went out, carried on channels the entire galaxy could hear. And with it went footage of the battle, video of human ships tearing through Council formations, images of the debris field, proof that the mighty Council fleet had been shattered by a species they'd called primitive. Earth had drawn first blood, and the galaxy was watching. The Council expected humanity to celebrate their victory and prepare for the next attack. Instead, 3 days after the battle, Human fleets started appearing across the galaxy. Not defending, attacking. Taman commanded the Vengeance fleet from the bridge of the destroyer Retribution. His target was Kelmar Prime, homeworld of the Kelmarian species. The same species whose delegate had called humans biologically programmed for aggression. He'd studied their world during the long flight through captured portal technology. Beautiful cities, peaceful population, billions of beings who had lived in safety for thousands of years. They had voted for Earth's enslavement. Now they would learn what that vote cost. Drop us out of faster-than-light at orbital distance, Taman ordered. I want them to see us coming. The Vengeance fleet materialized in Kelmar's orbit. 30 warships bristling with weapons, their hulls still scarred from the first battle. The planet's defense satellites activated immediately, but they were designed to handle pirates and minor threats, not a full military fleet. Taman opened a channel to the planet's surface. This is Admiral Taman of Earth. Your species voted to enslave mine. You supported taking our children and putting chips in their heads. You thought we would accept that. You were wrong. Panic erupted on Kelmar Prime. Their defense forces scrambled, but they hadn't fought a real war in millennia. Their ships were ceremonial. Their weapons were outdated. Against human vessels built specifically for killing, they lasted minutes. Commence Operation Nightmare, Taman ordered. Yuna was the architect of Operation Nightmare. She was young, only 28, but she understood psychological warfare better than anyone. Her theory was simple. The Council species had lived in peace for so long they'd forgotten what real fear felt like. Humanity would remind them. The bombardment began, but not random destruction. Targeted strikes, military installations first, then government buildings, then the infrastructure that kept the cities running, power plants, water treatment facilities, communication arrays. Taman's fleet reduced Kelmar's civilization by 1,000 years in 3 hours, but that wasn't the nightmare part. The nightmare was what came after. Every screen on Kelmar Prime suddenly showed the same broadcast. The council chamber, the vote, 847 blue lights. The moment every species agreed to enslave humanity. Then it showed the battle at Earth, council ships being torn apart, thousands dying, the debris field that used to be the pride of the Galactic fleet. Then came Yuna's message, translated into every language on Kelmar. You voted for our enslavement. This is what happens to slavers. We are coming for every species that raised their hand. We will never stop. We will never forgive. And we are teaching the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. The broadcast looped, playing over and over. Impossible to shut off because human hackers had infiltrated every system on the planet. The Kelmarians couldn't escape the message. They couldn't stop watching their own condemnation. Taman pulled his fleet back before casualties became too severe. The goal wasn't genocide. It was demonstration. Make them regret the vote. Make them fear humanity. Make them understand that their comfortable existence was over. As the Vengeance fleet jumped to the next target, Kelmar Prime was left in ruins, its population traumatized, its government collapsed. A warning to the rest of the galaxy. This is what happens. This is the cost. Dongyun led the ground operations on Thessar 4, a council military staging world. While Taman's fleet drew attention in orbit, Dongyun and 500 Marines infiltrated the surface. Their mission was specific: capture the council officers commanding the garrison and broadcast their trial across the galaxy. The infiltration was almost too easy. The Thessarians had soldiers, but they'd been bred for peacekeeping, not combat. They trained for crowd control and disaster relief. Dongyun's Marines had trained for war against an enemy that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. The Thessarian garrison never stood a chance. Dongyun found the commanding general in his quarters, surrounded by guards who surrendered the moment human soldiers appeared. The general was a tall being covered in blue scales, his eyes wide with terror. He'd watched the footage from Earth. He knew what humans could do. I'm not here to kill you, Dongyun told him through a translator. I'm here to give you a trial. You commanded forces intended to occupy Earth. You were prepared to implement the enslavement protocols. Now you're going to answer for that. The trial was broadcast across the galactic net. No torture, no cruelty, just questions and answers. Did you know your orders would result in human children being taken from their families? Yes. Did you know compliance chips would be used to alter human behavior? Yes. Did you believe this was justified? Yes, because the council deemed it necessary. The council voted, the general protested. I was following lawful orders. Dongyun looked at him without expression. We had a period on Earth called World War II. There were trials then, too. Following orders didn't excuse what was done. It doesn't excuse what you were going to do. The verdict was predetermined. Guilty, the sentence was death. Not because of cruelty, but because humanity needed to send a message. You cannot vote to enslave an entire species and expect to walk away. The execution was quick and clean. A single shot, broadcast live. The general's body was left in the garrison's main square with a sign in every galactic language. Slaver. The price has been paid. Across the galaxy, council species watched in horror. The humans weren't just fighting. They were hunting down everyone who had been part of the decision to enslave. Earth, officers, officials, leaders, anyone who had supported the vote was now a target. Yuna coordinated it all from a ship that was constantly moving, never staying in one place long enough to be found. She tracked council personnel movements, identified targets, and directed human forces to them. Her operation was so effective that council officials started going into hiding, changing their names, fleeing to remote colonies. It didn't help. Humanity had 50 years of intercepted alien communications. They knew where everyone was. They knew where everyone had been. And they were patient. If a target hid, humans would wait. A month, a year. It didn't matter. Eventually the target would surface. And then humanity would strike. The council tried to organize a second invasion of Earth. They called for volunteers from their member species, offering rewards and promises. The response was pathetic. Most species refused to send ships. Some openly declared neutrality. A few minor species even secretly contacted Earth, offering information in exchange for being left alone. The council was fracturing. 10,000 years of unity, broken in months by a single aggressive species that refused to accept its place in the galactic order. On Tharok Station, a major council military base, the garrison woke one morning to find their shields down and their weapons offline. Human hackers had infiltrated every system. Then the broadcast started. Footage of the vote, footage of what happened at Earth, footage of what was happening to council worlds. The message was always the same. You voted for our enslavement. This is the consequence. Some council species tried negotiation. They sent ambassadors to neutral worlds, hoping to meet with human representatives. They offered reparations, apologies, even a formal reversal of the vote. He-Jin, now serving as Earth's diplomat to the galaxy, met with them. You had a choice, she told a delegation of minor species who claimed they'd been pressured to vote yes. You chose to side with oppressors because it was safe. Because opposing the council was dangerous. Now you want forgiveness because opposing Earth is dangerous. We made a mistake, one delegate pleaded. Please, our worlds are defenseless. We're not warriors like you. We'll do anything. He-Jin's expression was cold. Unconditional surrender. Complete disarmament. Reparations paid to Earth for the cost of this war. War criminals turned over for trial. And you'll spend the next century living with the knowledge that you voted to enslave children. Those are the terms. Accept them or don't. Either way, we're not stopping. Some species accepted. Others refused and found themselves added to the target list. Humanity didn't have the forces to occupy the entire galaxy. But they didn't need to. Fear did the work for them. Every council world now lived in terror, waiting for human ships to appear in their orbit. G1 coordinated the war from Earth, managing hundreds of operations simultaneously. It was exhausting work, but she couldn't stop. Every day the war continued was another day human children were safe. Another day the galaxy was learning that you couldn't threaten humanity without consequences. We're stretched thin, Minho warned during a strategy session. We've got forces scattered across 200 star systems. If the council manages to organize a coordinated response, we could be in trouble. They won't, G1 said confidently. They're too busy fighting each other now. Half their species want to surrender. The other half want to keep fighting but don't want to commit their own forces. The council is dead. They just don't know it yet. She was right. The council held an emergency session to discuss the human threat. It turned into chaos. Species blamed each other for provoking Earth. Old grudges surfaced. Some delegates walked out. Others called for the council's dissolution. The meeting ended without any decisions made. The council, which had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years, couldn't even agree on how to respond 2 years after the vote. The Galactic Council called an emergency summit, not to plan strategy or coordinate defense, to surrender. Yejin stood in the same chamber where humanity had been sentenced to slavery. The tiers that once held 847 species now held less than 400. Some species had been conquered by human forces. Others had withdrawn from the council entirely, desperate to distance themselves from the organization that had provoked Earth's wrath. Still others had simply ceased to exist, their civilizations erased by human military action. The council leader who had announced Earth's enslavement was gone. Killed when human special forces raided the council headquarters 6 months ago. In its place stood a coalition of desperate species, trying to salvage what remained of galactic civilization. We wish to discuss terms, the new council leader said. It was a Valorian, a species that had abstained from the original vote but been forced to participate anyway. Its voice lacked the arrogance of its predecessor. It sounded tired, defeated. Hyejin stood alone in the center of the chamber. No guards, no weapons. She didn't need them. Every species here knew what would happen if she was harmed. Taemin's fleet was 2 jump points away, waiting. One wrong move and this station would be debris. Terms, Hyejin repeated. You want to negotiate terms. After voting to enslave my species. After planning to take our children. After deciding that humanity didn't deserve freedom. Silence. No one had an answer to that. The vote was recorded. Permanent. 847 blue lights. No species could claim innocence. We were wrong, the Valorian leader said quietly. We made a terrible mistake. We asked for mercy. Hyejin pulled up a holographic display. Lists of names. Thousands of them. These are the humans who died defending Earth from your first attack. These are the soldiers who died liberating worlds from council occupation. These are the civilians killed in retaliatory strikes. Would you like to know how many names are on this list? The chamber remained silent. Mercy, Hyejin continued, is something you give to people who made mistakes. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Every single species here chose to enslave humanity. That wasn't an error. That was a decision. What do you want from us? Another delegate asked. We've lost. You've won. What more can we give you? Hyejin looked up at the tiers of defeated species. Everything. Unconditional surrender of all council military forces. Complete disarmament of member species. Reparations to Earth for the cost of this war. And trials. We want every council official who participated in the vote. Every military officer who was prepared to occupy Earth. Every being who raised their hand for our enslavement. They will face human justice. That's impossible, the Valorian leader protested. You're talking about millions of individuals. Trials would take decades. Then it takes decades, Hyejin said coldly. You had no problem planning to chip millions of humans. To take millions of our children. Now you're concerned about the time it takes to hold you accountable. While Hyejin negotiated with the Broken Council, Seojin hunted war criminals across the galaxy. He commanded a task force dedicated to finding those who had escaped justice. And his team was very good at their job. Their current target was hiding on Relesh 9, a remote mining colony at the edge of civilized space. Former Council Admiral Torvin, who had volunteered to lead the second invasion of Earth before it was canceled. He'd changed his appearance, assumed a new identity, and thought he was safe. He was wrong. Seojin's team infiltrated the colony during a shift change. No shooting, no explosions, just quiet efficiency. They found Torvin in his quarters watching galactic news about the ongoing peace talks. Admiral Torvin, Seojin said as his team secured the room, you're under arrest for war crimes against humanity. Torvin looked older than his file photos. Stress had aged him. I never actually attacked Earth, he said. The invasion was canceled. I did nothing. You volunteered to lead it, Seojin replied. You were prepared to implement enslavement protocols. Intent matters. I was following orders. The council voted. Seojin had heard this defense before. Everyone claimed they were following orders. No one wanted to accept personal responsibility. The council voted to enslave humanity. You volunteered to do it. There's a difference. The trial took place on Earth, broadcast across the galaxy. Torvin was given lawyers, allowed to present a defense, treated fairly according to human legal standards. The prosecution presented evidence of his communications, his plans for the invasion, his eagerness to participate in Earth's subjugation. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was imprisonment for life. Not death like earlier war criminals, because Torvin had never actually harmed a human, but he would spend the rest of his existence in a human prison. A living reminder of what happened to those who threatened Earth. Hundreds of trials followed. Council officials, military officers, bureaucrats who had processed the enslavement orders. Human courts worked around the clock, processing cases, delivering justice. Some received death sentences. Others got imprisonment. A few who could prove they'd been coerced or had actively opposed the vote were released with probation. The galaxy watched every trial, learned that humans took justice seriously, understood that there would be no escaping accountability. G1 oversaw the occupation of former council territories. It was a massive undertaking. Earth didn't have enough personnel to directly govern hundreds of worlds, so they implemented a different system. Local governments were allowed to remain in power, but they had to follow strict rules. No slavery. No forced labor. No persecution of minority populations. Any species found violating these rules would face immediate human military action. It was occupation through threat rather than presence, and surprisingly it worked. Most species were so terrified of humanity that they reformed their governments voluntarily. "We've become the thing we fought," Minho said during a late-night strategy session. "We're dictating terms to the galaxy, occupying worlds, imposing our will on other species." Jiwan looked at him. "Are we enslaving anyone? Taking their children? Putting chips in their heads? No, but we're using force to control them. We're using force to prevent them from doing to others what they tried to do to us," Jiwan corrected. "There's a difference. We didn't ask to be the galaxy's police force, but someone has to stop species from enslaving each other, and right now we're the only ones willing to do it." Some species adapted well to human oversight. They'd been oppressed by the council themselves and welcomed the change. Others resisted, forming insurgent groups, launching attacks on human forces. Those conflicts were ugly and difficult, testing humanity's commitment to its principles. Donghyun's Marines fought against a resistance movement on Krelax 4. The Krelaxians had been slavers themselves before the council vote, owning millions of beings from conquered species. When humanity ordered them to free their slaves, they'd refused. Now they were fighting to maintain their way of life. "We're not here to destroy you," Donghyun told captured Krelaxian fighters. "We're here to free your slaves. Let them go. Accept human oversight and you can keep your civilization. Keep fighting and we'll end you. Your choice." Most Krelaxians chose survival. They released their slaves, accepted human monitors, and began the long process of reforming their society. Those who didn't were eliminated systematically. Humanity had learned from history. You couldn't allow slavers to continue existing and hope they'd change. You had to force the change or remove them entirely. The council's formal dissolution came 18 months after the summit began. In a final ceremony, the remaining member species officially ended the organization that had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. No celebration, no grand speeches, just a simple acknowledgement that the old order was dead. Hyejin watched the ceremony from Earth, broadcast across every human world. Humanity had won. The species that had voted to enslave them was now under their control. The galaxy that had considered humans too dangerous to be free now lived under human protection. "Does it feel like victory?" Taemin asked. He'd returned to Earth after months of military operations, looking tired but satisfied. "It feels like responsibility," Hyejin replied. "We broke the council. Now we have to build something better, and we have to do it without becoming what they were." Taemin nodded. "Can we?" "We have to. Because if we fail, if we become oppressors instead of liberators, then everything we fought for was meaningless. We didn't destroy the council just to replace it with human tyranny." Across the galaxy, species watched and waited, some with hope, others with fear, all wondering what humanity would do with its newfound power. Would Earth become the benevolent protector it claimed to be, or would it become another empire, ruling through strength and intimidation? The answer would shape the galaxy for millennia to come, and humanity was still figuring out what that answer was. The council had fallen. The war was over, but the real test was just beginning. Winning a war was simple compared to building a lasting peace, and humanity had never been good at simple things. Jiwan stood in the Geneva headquarters, looking at displays showing human forces scattered across hundreds of worlds. Governors requesting guidance, commanders reportee. but math doesn't capture what it feels like to make that choice. Lieutenant Taejin, still on the council, began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. 5 years had passed since the council's dissolution. The galaxy looked different now. Where once there had been a strict hierarchy with the council at the top and humanity at the bottom, now there was a loose federation of independent species working together by choice rather than compulsion. Ambassador Doyen Choi, now gray-haired and weathered by the years of conflict and negotiation, stood before the first assembly of the Galactic Union. Representatives from 41 species filled the chamber. Some were former council members. Some had been neutral during the war. A few were species that had been suppressed by the council and were now free to join galactic society. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, Doyen began, but as equals who've learned hard lessons about the cost of arrogance and the value of mutual respect. The Thai representative, its crystalline body reflecting light and patterns that conveyed approval, spoke next. The humans taught us that peace maintained through dominance is not true peace. It is merely the silence of the oppressed. The Krell ambassador, a scarred veteran who'd fought at Mars, added his voice. We came to Earth expecting easy victory. We found worthy opponents who fought with skill we had forgotten existed. More importantly, we found enemies who became allies once the fighting stopped. This is the mark of true strength. But not everyone was present. The Vren Collective, now split into 4 separate groups, had sent only observers. The species was still healing from its civil war. 7 queens had become 4, each leading their own faction, trying to find a new way forward after millennia of forced unity. Dr. Min-ho Kwon, his medical expertise now focused on helping species recover from the war's trauma, worked in a rehabilitation center on a neutral world. Before him sat a former Vren drone, a being who'd been freed from the collective consciousness. How do you feel? Min-ho asked. The former drone, struggling with pronouns and individual identity after a lifetime as part of a greater whole, hesitated. Empty, full, confused, scared, happy, sad all at once. Is this normal? For someone learning to be an individual for the first time? Yes, completely normal, Min-ho said gently. You're experiencing emotions without the collective filtering them. It's overwhelming at first. The queens say we are broken. That individuality is a disease you humans infected us with. Min-ho shook his head. Individuality isn't a disease. It's a choice. The queens are angry because they lost control, but that control was never truly theirs to claim. You're not broken. You're becoming yourself for the first time. Across the galaxy, Commander Soman Lee stood in a cemetery on Earth. Row after row of markers stretched before her, each one representing someone who died in the war. She stopped at one marker in particular, running her fingers over the engraved name. Lieutenant Taejin Nam, killed in action defending a civilian transport from a Krell revenge strike 2 years ago. He'd evacuated the civilians first, staying behind to hold off the attackers until help arrived. Help came too late. You always said the hard part wasn't fighting, Soman whispered to the marker. You said the hard part was knowing when to stop, when to show mercy, when to be human instead of just being a soldier. I'm trying. It's harder than I thought. She placed a flower genetically engineered to survive in any environment at the base of the marker. It would bloom for decades, a small symbol of memory in a galaxy trying to forget the pain of war. Captain Ji-woo Kim, now Admiral Ji-woo Kim, commanded the human defense fleet from a new flagship. The Indomitable had been retired to a museum, a reminder of what had been necessary but also what they hoped never to need again. His current mission was different from anything he'd done during the war. He was escorting Vren refugee ships to a new colony world, protecting them from the few remaining extremists who believed the only good Vren was a dead Vren. Sir, we're detecting weapons signatures ahead, his tactical officer reported. 3 ships, probably pirates taking advantage of the chaos. Hail them, Ji-woo ordered. Inform them these refugees are under human protection. The pirate ships powered down their weapons without a fight. The reputation humans had built during the war served a new purpose now. They were known as fierce fighters, yes, but also as protectors who meant what they said. One of the Vren queens sent him a message afterward. Why do you protect us? Your people died because of our actions. Because that's what it means to be human, Ji-woo replied. We remember the past, but we don't let it poison the future. You were our enemies. Now you're people who need help. The war is over. Time to act like it. Admiral Heejin Park had retired from active service, but her work continued. She taught at the new Galactic Military Academy, where officers from dozens of species learned not just tactics and strategy, but also ethics and the laws of war. In her classroom, students from former enemy species sat side by side with humans, learning from someone who'd orchestrated their defeat. War, she told her students, is humanity's oldest tradition and our greatest shame. We've practiced it for 5,000 years. We're very, very good at it. But the measure of a civilization isn't how well they wage war. It's whether they have the wisdom to avoid it and the strength to end it with mercy when it can't be avoided. A Krell student raised a clawed hand. Admiral, during the war, humans had the opportunity to exterminate the Council species completely. You had the weapons and the advantage. Why didn't you? Hyejin smiled sadly. Because we remembered what it felt like to be on the other side. Humans have faced extinction many times in our history. We've been conquered, enslaved, and nearly wiped out by disease, disaster, and our own stupidity. We knew what you were feeling because we'd felt it ourselves. And we decided that just because we could destroy you didn't mean we should. She pulled up a holographic display showing casualty figures from the war. Millions dead on both sides. Entire fleets destroyed. Worlds scarred by battle. Every name on this list represents someone who won't go home. Someone who won't see their family again. Someone whose potential was cut short by violence. We won the war, yes, but we lost too. Everyone did. That's why we teach this class, so the next generation might be wise enough to avoid what we couldn't. On Earth, in a small town far from any military installation, a reunion was taking place. Veterans from different species gathered not to refight old battles, but to remember and to heal together. A former Krell warrior stood beside a human Marine who'd fought at Mars. They compared scars and told stories, finding common ground in shared trauma. A Thay observer watched in fascination, documenting how former enemies could become friends. We tried to kill each other, the Krell warrior said, clicking his jaws, and what humans had learned was laughter. Now we drink together and complain about our commanders. The commanders were trying to kill us too, the human Marine joked. Just through stupidity instead of weapons. They laughed. But underneath the humor was something deeper. Understanding. Recognition that they'd all been tools of powers beyond their control. Soldiers following orders. Survivors trying to make sense of what they'd experienced. Ambassador Doyen watched recordings of these gatherings with mixed emotions. Pride at what humanity had achieved. Sorrow for the cost. Hope for the future. And always, always the weight of the decisions he'd made. His assistant entered with news. Ambassador, we've received a message from the Terminus cluster. The species that fled during the war are requesting permission to return to known space. What's changed? Doyen asked. They say they've encountered something out there. Something that makes them prefer human protection to whatever is in the dark between the stars. Doyen felt a chill. The galaxy was vast and humanity's knowledge of it was still limited. What could possibly scare species who'd been willing to flee into the unknown rather than accept human terms? Send a response. Tell them they can return. But they follow Galactic Union laws. No more hierarchies. No more forced compliance. Everyone is equal or no one is. He looked out at the stars, wondering what was out there beyond the edge of mapped space. The war with the Council had revealed humanity's capacity for violence and mercy in equal measure. But there were older things in the galaxy. Things that predated even the Council. On a medical station, Dr. Minho received an unusual patient. A member of one of the species that had fled, now returning sick and frightened. As Minho examined them, he found something that shouldn't exist. Cellular corruption that looked almost like a disease but followed patterns that suggested intelligence. Where did you encounter this? Minho asked. Beyond the rim, the patient whispered. There are things out there. Old things. Hungry things. They saw us and they followed. We ran, but I don't think we can run far enough. Minho sent an immediate report to Admiral Hyejin. Within hours, every military installation in the galaxy was on alert. Human deep space reconnaissance vessels deployed to the galactic rim, searching for whatever had frightened the refugees. Captain Jiwoo commanded one of these missions. His fleet moved slowly through the dark between stars, sensors straining to detect any anomaly. For 3 weeks they found nothing. Then, on a routine scan of an empty system, they detected something impossible. A ship, but not a ship like anything in the know. The chamber was larger than any building on Earth. Taman stood at the center, feeling the weight of 847 different species watching him. Their eyes, in all shapes and colors, focused on him with the cold calculation of judges who had already decided the verdict. His sister Hyejin stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back in a pose of diplomatic calm that he knew was purely an act. The council leader rose from its seat. The creature looked like a combination of crystal and light, speaking through a translation device that made its voice boom across the massive hall. "We have reviewed Earth's history. We have studied your species for 5 decades. We have seen enough." Taman's jaw tightened. 50 years ago, humanity had sent out radio signals hoping to find friends among the stars. They found judges instead. The Galactic Council arrived, observed from orbit, and never once made contact. They watched humanity like scientists studying bacteria in a dish. "Your species is violent," the council leader continued. "Your planet's surface bears the scars of thousands of wars. Your history is written in blood. Every century, you find new reasons to kill each other. Nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological plagues unleashed on your own kind." Yejin stepped forward. "Every species has a difficult past. We've learned from our mistakes. We've built a united government. We've achieved peace." A ripple of what might have been laughter moved through the chamber. A delegate that looked like a floating mass of tentacles spoke up. "You've had peace for 30 years. 30 years out of 10,000 years of recorded history. This is not evolution. This is a pause between conflicts." Another delegate, this one resembling a giant insect covered in golden armor, added its voice. "We performed genetic analysis on your population. Every other species in the galaxy has the docility sequence in their DNA, a natural trait that allows for peaceful coexistence. Humans lack this entirely. You are biologically programmed for aggression." Taman felt his anger rising but forced it down. Getting emotional now would only prove their point. "We're different, yes, but different doesn't mean dangerous. We came here in peace. We've asked only for the chance to join the galactic community as equals." The council leader's crystalline form shifted colors, from blue to deep red. "Equals? Your species hasn't even left your own solar system. You have no colonies, no faster-than-light travel, no understanding of dimensional physics. You are children playing with fire." "Then teach us," Hyejin said. "Guide us. Isn't that what the council does? Help younger species develop?" "We do help younger species," the council leader agreed. "We guide them. We shape them. We ensure they don't become threats to the established order." The creature paused and Taman felt his stomach drop. He knew what was coming next. "That is why we have called this session. To vote on Earth's status." The chamber fell silent. Taman looked up at the tiers of delegates stretching into the distance. Hundreds of species, thousands of representatives, all watching the two humans standing alone in the center of it all. "The question before the council is simple," the leader announced. "Should humanity be granted provisional membership with guidance restrictions, or should they be placed under protective custody for the safety of the galaxy?" Protective custody, the council's polite term for slavery. Taman had read the reports, studied what happened to other species deemed too dangerous or too primitive. Their worlds were occupied. Their children were taken and raised in council education centers. Their adults were fitted with compliance chips that regulated behavior and emotion. Within 3 generations, those species ceased to be what they were. They became docile, obedient, safe. "We will vote now," the council leader declared. "All in favor of protective custody, indicate your approval." Taman watched in growing horror as lights began appearing across the chamber. Blue lights, thousands of them, like stars filling a night sky. Each light represented a species casting their vote. He kept waiting for the lights to stop, for some species to abstain or vote differently, but the lights kept coming. Every single seat lit up blue. 847 species. 0 abstentions. 0 votes against. The universe had just unanimously decided that humanity should be enslaved. Hyejin's diplomatic mask finally cracked. "You can't do this. We're a sovereign species. We have rights." "You have the rights we grant you," the council leader said, its voice somehow gentle and terrible at once. "This decision is final. Council enforcement fleets will arrive at Earth in 7 days. You will have that time to inform your population and prepare for peaceful transition." "Peaceful?" Taman's voice came out as a harsh whisper. "You're going to invade our world, chip our people like animals, and steal our children. What's peaceful about that?" The alternative is war, the insect-like delegate said. And war would result in humanity's extinction. The Council has 10,000 warships. You have none that can leave your solar system. Be grateful we're offering you survival, even if it means sacrifice. The tentacle delegate added, your children will thank us. In 3 generations, humans will be free of the violent urges that plague you. They'll live in peace, contributing to the galactic community without the burden of your aggressive nature. Taman looked at his sister. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. They had come here hoping for acceptance, prepared for rejection, but this was beyond their worst nightmares. 7 days, the council leader repeated. Use them wisely. Prepare your people for what comes next. Resistance will only bring suffering. Compliance will ensure a smooth transition. The session ended. Guards appeared, tall, armored beings that escorted Taman and Hyejin from the chamber. As they walked through the corridors of the massive station, passing aliens who wouldn't meet their eyes, Taman's mind raced. 7 days. The council was giving them 7 days. The council had made its first mistake. Their ship was waiting at the dock, a small Earth vessel that looked pathetic next to the massive alien craft surrounding it. Captain Soman was waiting at the airlock, her face tense. She'd been watching the session from orbit. She knew what had happened. Get us home, Taman ordered as soon as they were aboard. Best possible speed. As the ship pulled away from the council station and entered the portal that would take them back to Earth, Taman stared out at the sea of alien vessels. Thousands of ships representing civilizations that had existed for millions of years. All of them had agreed. All of them had voted to take away humanity's freedom. Hyejin sat beside him, her hands shaking. What do we do? Taman's expression hardened. He thought about his children back on Earth. About every human child who would grow up with chips in their heads, their personalities erased, their humanity bred out of them like unwanted traits from a domesticated animal. We show them why they should have voted differently, he said quietly. We show them exactly what happens when you try to enslave humanity. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying them home. Behind them, the council was already mobilizing its fleets, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had the numbers. They had the technology. They had existed for eons, but they had never fought humans before. They had never encountered a species that would rather die fighting than live on their knees. They were about to learn what desperation looked like when it had 7 days to prepare. Earth's enslavement had been approved, but Earth's response would be something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would change everything. Something that would make them regret that unanimous vote for the rest of their existence.